Good morning. Good morning. Please stand. Join me for number 1053 in the teal hymnal, How Could Anyone?
Cheers. What's that?
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you. Is it Sunday? So I just flew in from Chicago, and boy, are my arms tired. In fact, I'm tired, period. So it was one of those get in after midnight sort of things. And my sermon is going to be on the conference that I attended in Chicago, which means I had to write it between leaving Chicago and getting here this morning. So hopefully it's cohesive enough to understand. We'll see. But I'll say more about the Heterodox Academy in a bit. But Stephanie, I want to thank you because you and Shane actually introduced me to the Heterodox Academy 2 years ago. And the three of us traveled to Denver for that conference. And it really exposed me to a lot of community, a lot of understanding, and a lot of hope for turning things around. And so I appreciate that. And this year, Madeline went, and I know she had a great time. I didn't get to see you much, so I'm looking forward to hearing some of your experience too. But you're probably as tired as I am. What time did you get in?
I think
Midnight or something, yeah. So today.
Yeah.
This morning. So anyway, we don't want to forego the usual greeting of welcoming everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, even with a cup of coffee in my hand, where we like to begin with our church mission statement, which I think is important. This is something we started doing several years ago. It's not something we've always done in this church, but something we did several years ago to kind of remind ourselves regularly what it is that we are about, as well as folks who might be joining us for this first time. So we try to summarize our mission statement as this church being a place where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home. Right? Those are pretty important words right there. A nourishing, liberal, religious home, and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. And when we were thinking about adding this to our morning ritual, we also thought it sure would be nice if we had something we could put on a t-shirt or a hat, which is true. So we condensed it informally to create community, find meaning, and live justly or work for justice, whichever you prefer. This is part of our heterodoxy, that we can have different ways of expressing ourselves and still be fine with that. So, that said, welcome as always to each and every one of you. We're so glad to have you here, including all that you bring with you, all of your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, all that makes you who you are, is welcome here this morning. By the way, I notice what we're calling our Pride flag is still up this morning. Pride weekend. I guess it's still Pride weekend, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm not a fan of this particular flag. This is the new flag. And I'm not a fan of it because it represents the segregationist. To me, it represents the segregationist mindset that is poisoning liberalism these days. So, by adding to the rainbow these particular colors that represent one group, transgender, for example, I can't remember, darker skinned, gays and lesbians, I think, and so on. It begins this thing of where we're constantly trying to find which group is left out and represent them. And the idea of the rainbow is that is the spectrum. That gets everybody, including me, including you. It gets all of us. So I'm not a fan of this flag, and it's caused some consternation in the community. Not our community. Not our community, because you know what? It's okay if you like this flag. If this flag works for you, fantastic. I don't care. It doesn't work as well for me, but I am not at all offended by it, because I get to just tell you what I think of it, and you can tell me what you think of it too. Yeah, Alan, I'll take just one question.
I think I have the same issues. I like the old flag.
You have the same issues and like the old flag.
I like the old flag. You said it for me very well.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm just going on this morning. What's that? How about the Zoomers? Hey! Our Zoomers, yes, thank you. Let's see. I turned around. We got a good group today. How's everybody doing? I see everybody waving now behind me. So, yeah. Would you like to say a few words? Go ahead, Terry. I think you've got maybe some folks on there that we've not met yet. No?
Don't think so. Just reliable old hands, or not old, young at heart hands. I'd like to share a little bit, just for a second, take my
Please.
chairman's prerogative. But I've been reading a real interesting book. It's called Freedom Goes West by Gallica Little. It's the 100th anniversary of the Western Unitarian Association, or something to that effect. And you can get it on Internet Archive, but it's really hard to find in paper. But what was interesting to me is just it covers the, quotes, great schism of the end of the, in the middle of the 1850s, 60, 70, 80, that time. But it was all, about a marked dispute over are we Christians or are we not? And is there a big enough room, is our tent big enough to hold the humanists and atheists who were coming, including, of course, from Spokane, and John Dietrich and others are mentioned a lot. But to me, it was Unitarian did survive that schism, and did get back together again eventually. With people learning to accept, just as you said, Todd, the fact that we might not like all the same slogans or the same flags or the same this or that, but we can still have enough common purpose and fellowship, I guess, to enhance our lives. So that's all I'm going to say. I was going to save it for our coffee room, but maybe I'll share it with those in our larger Spokane congregation.
Well, thank you for that. And it's Freedom Goes West. Was that the title?
Yeah, and it was published by Beacon Press in 1952.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great piece of our history for those who don't know it. And particularly moving west, right away from Boston, where the religion started in the U.S. and was more traditional, and like a lot of people moving towards the frontier, they were on the frontier of new thought and new ideas, including some of the radical ideas that this community in Spokane used to just drive to. They were just driven to come and hear the radical speakers at this church, who were saying things like, maybe we don't need to be talking about God or use Christian language, those sort of things. So that's a really rich part of our history. And yes, I think the more poignant part is that we've had, a few of these schisms over the centuries and have found our way back to each other over time. So that's hopeful. So thank you for that, Terry. And thanks to everybody on Zoom for being with us. Thanks to everybody who is also live streaming with us this morning. I know you don't get to engage with us while we're live, but we know you're there, and I hear from many of you often, and some of you kind of come in and out of the service too. So always great to have all of you, as well as the many of you who are in the room with us this morning. So even though I rambled a lot this morning, why don't we take the usual time to greet one another, whether you're in this room or what's that? Oh, I've got to tell them about the annual meeting. Yes, we have an annual meeting. No, it's actually going to be today, so it is important. After our second service, beginning about 12:30, if you are a voting member, we do need a quorum in order to conduct the church business. So if you're available and want to come back around 12:30, that'd be wonderful too. And it will be on Zoom as well. So if you're a member who is zooming in from afar, please plan to attend. We would appreciate it. Okay, yeah. So now, Rita, thank you, Todd. Now, you guys keep me awake today, okay?
It's my job to keep the public meeting here.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Yes, if you are interested in attending.
All right. More time as always to visit during our social hour, but let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
For my opening reflection today, it's called Surrender and Letting Your Life Speak. The contrasts are striking. No versus yes, control versus surrender, willfulness versus willingness, holding on versus letting go. When we hold on, our hand is clenched, and when we let go, our hand is open to possibility, open to experience, open to wisdom, open to compassion, open to understanding, and open to life. The illusion is that we are in control when we are not. And it takes many lessons and much time to learn this hard truth. The Buddhists speak of the value of detachment. Some misunderstanding this stance, thinking that it means not caring. In fact, detachment is an act of compassion, one that realizes that we cannot control the outcome. Open hands and open heart. As Joshua Kaufman observes, surrender is not giving up on life, but giving up fighting with life. And when you are not fighting with life, you're working with life.
Please stand. Join me for Filled with Loving Kindness, number 1031. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
We're now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds. And begin as we have been on behalf of the people of Ukraine who are suffering, Ukraine and that region of the world who are suffering from the violence and the war there. And I might even throw in the misinformation and the disinformation that is used to keep people apart from understanding what's really going on. And a candle of care for the same reasons for the people of Israel and the Palestinian people who are suffering from the terrible circumstances there. I also want to kindle a candle today for Joni Nelson, one of our longtime members who's experiencing several chronic health issues that really make it difficult for her to even leave home. She misses people and would appreciate your phone calls. Please keep her and Sue Watering both in your thoughts at this time as they face this together. Also want to kindle a candle of celebration on behalf of Nancy and Dale Avery, whose 51st wedding anniversary is today. So if they show up for the second service at least, we'll have to congratulate them in person. And then also Nancy asked if we would kindle a candle thanking everyone who marched in yesterday's parade as well as helped worked our booth. Thank you for helping our church to have a presence there, a meaningful presence there. So let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. It's right there on my script. We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
you so much, Todd. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're playing? Like, I played the flute in band, but that's not the kind of flute I played.
Well, this is the Japanese shakuhachi. It's an end-blown bamboo flute. Like all flutes, it's really just a tube with holes. A Western classical flute would have all kinds of mechanism, basically, so you can just have more holes and more notes. This is just very simply a tube, 5 holes. As with all flutes, you're blowing, splitting the wind column over an edge. The flute is the only musical instrument that does not have a vibrating medium. Every other instrument has some kind of physical thing that vibrates, and that vibrates the air. With the flute, you're just literally exciting the air column itself. So.
Thank you for the explanation. It's beautiful. All right, well, last Sunday was an intergenerational service where you could argue the whole thing was a time for all ages for the kids. So this morning, I have a story that's just for the grown-ups. Imagine sitting with a friend in the shade of a big tree, enjoying a chat while you watch children scale the play structure, discover one of nature's hidden treasures, or invent a new game of tag. The sun warms your skin as the smell of your coffee mixes with the scent of pine. Memories of your own childhood adventures bubble to the surface of your mind, bringing a smile to your face. That's what volunteering at Play Club might feel like. You may have heard the recent buzz about Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation. In it, he proposes that more unsupervised play and childhood independence would be a solution to the phone-based childhoods that are taking play away from our children. Several years ago, with Lenore Skenazy and others, Haidt formed the Let Grow organization, which defines Play Club as a mixed-age, unstructured, free play without adult direction or interference. There are just 3 rules in Play Club. Number 1, play respectfully. Do not deliberately hit or physically hurt another child. Number 2, get permission before you leave the grounds. And number 3, listen to the adults who will intervene only when they must. So throughout the summer months at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, we're taking the kids outside to do Play Club. This will be our 3rd year of implementing this program, but we can't do it without the help of volunteer supervisors. And as a Play Club supervisor, your job is simple. You just have to be on hand for actual emergencies, but otherwise you should almost disappear from the children's awareness, because kids are, like we explored last Sunday, pretty amazing at figuring out things on their own. Haidt explains that they'll probably negotiate any conflicts that arise so that they can keep the fun going. Your job is really easy. It's a no-prep, low-commitment way to support the flourishing of children in our church community. If you would like to sign up for a relaxing morning while making a difference, you can sign up online through the Sun newsletter. There have been links each week, and there's also a physical copy out on the RE table. If you aren't interested in supervising or aren't able to supervise but would still like to support our Play Club, you can donate snacks. The kids love granola bars and juice boxes and homemade goodies. And you can also make a monetary donation and just make a note in the memo that you'd like to support Play Club snacks. Let me know if you have any questions, and enjoy a summer of play.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It almost started out as my meditation, sitting there thinking and listening. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So I do invite you into a time of meditation now. Adjust your position so that you're comfortable. Put your feet on the floor. Close your eyes if you wish. Take a deep breath in and breathe out. Osho says, the essential surrender happens within you. It has nothing to do with anybody outside you. The basic surrender is a relaxation, a trust, So don't be misguided by the world. Linguistically, surrender means to surrender to somebody, but religiously. Surrender simply means trust, relaxing. It is an attitude rather than an act. You live through trust.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, we don't know whether to applaud that music or just to sit with it. So I hope you don't take offense that we don't rush into applaud like we often do. And, you know, Todd, of course, has been our audiovisual manager for how many years now, Todd? It's been a long time.
5
5 or 7, something like that. But he really was introduced to this church as the musician that he is. In fact, he played, I think, was it the first service that I gave here? Todd was the special music.
I think that was my first time.
It was your first time too. Wow. Yeah. And anyway, he does it. Obviously, he's become a real expert at AV, and he's working in that field outside of this church even now. But he really is an artist and a musician. That's fundamentally who he is. And I always appreciate when we get to take advantage of your talent. And I'll never forget that during COVID, when it was just you and I in here, keeping our distance, that the only music we had was your music that you would play from your CDs, and you gifted us with that. And really appreciate the gift of music and artistry and talent that you have, Todd. So, yeah, yep. And Maura, not bad at the AV. We're going to keep that in mind. Yeah. Of course, having such serene flute music and words of meditation that say simply relax on a day the minister goes to bed at 1 and gets up at 5, Don't relax too much. Before I move into my sermon, this is kind of off the cuff, but Madeline, would you like to, offer a few thoughts about your experience?
Yeah, a little off the cuff. The Heterodox Academy was incredible. It was inspiring to see so many people from different parts of the country in different universities and institutions and walks of life come together almost as if they're trying to come home. It had that feeling like we're trying to come home to family and talk about things that are really important to us without feeling we have to hold back. And also, we're going to love each other at the end of the meal. It really felt like that, and so it was beautiful, and so it was vibrant. It was opinionated. It was inspiring, and beautiful speakers too. Very inspiring, well-educated, thoughtful speakers.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad you went.
Yeah. Thanks for making it able for me to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to. So, several years ago, not long after I arrived in Spokane in 2011, if you can believe it, I was 48, now I'm 60. I began sensing that something had gone awry in our religion. And it was subtle at first and mostly manifested as the willingness of some Unitarian Universalists, mostly in leadership positions, especially ministers, to publicly shame other UUs for saying things that they disagree with. Later it became apparent that white males, particularly white straight males, were being systematically removed from the UUA's platforms, including its podiums, its pulpits, and its publications. During collegial gatherings, which I eventually stopped attending, white males, especially older white males, increasingly felt fearful of openly expressing ourselves as the result of negative reinforcements and other group dynamics. These dynamics were at first as subtle as they were troubling, but by 2017, after a person wasn't hired for a job by the Unitarian Universalist Association, blamed her rejection on white supremacy, all pretense ended and the new illiberal, irrational, and intolerant culture and ideology that has overtaken the UUA and many of its member congregations became obvious to us all. And in an effort to understand what was happening and to make others aware of it, I began researching the same phenomenon in our wider culture, which eventually resulted in my 2019 book, The Gadfly Papers, that led to my immediate, public, and painful cancellation by hundreds of my colleagues and the UUA leadership, all of which proved the point of my book. So if you haven't read the book, just research what happened in the aftermath and you'll get it. So I bring this up now only to say that what I experienced and what our congregation has endured in the aftermath of the Gadfly Papers and the disruption and division that is similarly occurring in many of our congregations, both in the U.S. and in Canada, is not exclusive to Unitarian Universalism. Not by any means. It's happened or is happening in much of the world, especially to progressive institutions. This is no truer anywhere than in academia, where it began, starting around 1990, although its roots go even deeper into the past, certainly into the 1970s, and arguably back into the 1950s when American colleges first became enamored with postmodern philosophy. There is no truth, no objective truth. Reason doesn't work. So just believe whatever the hell you want. And it was okay to believe whatever the hell you want until they said, believe whatever the hell you want as long as you agree with me, which is the oxymoron of postmodern philosophy. So it seems reasonable to believe that this is also where the problem must be dealt with in order to stop the hemorrhaging that is bleeding into the whole of society as their graduates continue to enter the workforce and society to influence and even run many of our most liberal institutions and organizations. Right? The problem is not constrained to the academy after decades of graduates entering into the world. So this has led to, as William Galston, a senior fellow of the Brookings Institute, said in a 2022 New York Times article, the presence in every progressive organization of a small but very vocal fringe that views every problem as a sin. And that word sin is appropriate to describe the dynamics of what many are considering a new secular religion that is authoritarian, punitive, persecutory, and extremely dogmatic. And this is where the Heterodox Academy comes in, and heterodoxy itself, because the widespread phenomenon began in academia decades ago. Academia also has the oldest and most advanced responses, including organizations like the Heterodox Academy, also known as HXA. Heterodoxy translates, hetero translates, and doxy translate into different opinions. In contrast to orthodoxy, which refers to one right, or literally one straight opinion. Right? You ever heard someone say, better get your head on straight? Right? You better become orthodox. As its website explains, Heterodox Academy was founded in 2015 by social psychologist and best-selling author Jonathan Haidt, sociologist Chris Martin, and Georgetown law professor Nicholas Rosencrantz, in response to the lack of ideological diversity on college campuses and how it's negatively impacting the quality of research within their disciplines. Our commitment to heterodoxy within the academy is a response to the rise of orthodoxy within scholarly culture that leads people to fear shame, ostracism, or any other form of social or professional retaliation for questioning or challenging a commonly held idea. That's an important line, a commonly held idea, right? HXA says that it further envisions an academy eager to welcome professors, students, and speakers who approach problems and questions from different points of view, explicitly valuing the role such diversity plays in advancing the pursuit of knowledge, discovery, growth, innovation, and the exposure of falsehoods. Right? We have to be able to express different views in order to achieve a greater awareness of truth. During the past 3 days, I attended the Heterodox Academy's conference, again in Chicago, along with over 400 other attendees. And I can't say a negative word about any of the workshops or plenaries that I took advantage of, although some of the content regarding the suffering of college professors and other faculty and even many students that they're enduring these days was sometimes overwhelming. As Fire, founded by attorney Greg Lukianoff, who was co-author of The Coddling of the American Mind with Jonathan Haidt. The presentation was entitled Understanding Faculty Rights and How FIRE's Legal Defense Fund Can Help. It's a long title. Understanding Faculty Rights and How FIRE's Legal Defense Fund Can Help. Now think about that. The possibility of a professor getting into trouble simply for saying something that somebody finds disagreeable has become so pervasive that such a fund has to exist, along with a 24-hour hotline staffed for those who find themselves in potential trouble. The fund doesn't pay for professors to sue a university, although the organization will help them find attorneys who might, but really to pay for lawyers to help them prevent a situation from ever going to court by reminding school administrators of their rights, particularly regarding the freedom of speech. The reality I learned is that the law is on the side of the professors, even though administrators often have to be reminded of this fact. As far back as 1957, for example, in the Sweezy versus New Hampshire case, the Supreme Court ruled that jailing an academic because he refused to answer questions about some of his lectures was a violation of due process, thus establishing the notion of academic freedom. So the notion of academic freedom goes back to 1957. Chief Justice Earl Warren stated, "The essentiality of freedom in the community of American universities is almost self-evident. No one should underestimate the vital role in a democracy that is played by those who guide and train our youth. To impose any straitjacket upon the intellectual leaders in our colleges and universities would imperil the future of our nation." And it has. In 1967, New York State had a law prohibiting state employees from being part of any organization seeking to overthrow the government, which was interpreted to include anyone belonging to the Communist Party. This led to Keishian versus the Board of Regents, a suit against the State University of New York, which required employees to sign an oath stating they were not communist. Once again, firmly guaranteeing the principle of academic freedom, the Supreme Court ruled against the State University of New York. Again, in 1972, in Healy versus James, the Supreme Court ruled against Central Connecticut State College for refusing to recognize an on-campus chapter of the Students for a Democratic Society as unconstitutional, determining that the First Amendment applies to all public institutions. Right? So, as far as 1972, public colleges have been guaranteed as a place where freedom of speech, particularly on behalf of professors, is guaranteed. So how is it then that out of all these rulings by the highest court in the U.S., it has become so common for freedom of speech rights to be violated on college campuses that it's necessary to establish a legal defense fund for professors and others who are simply speaking their minds, based often upon their expertise or their area of interest or research? At HXA, whether during workshops or informal conversations, I heard several painful stories of college professors and others whose freedom of speech rights have been violated, or who have been publicly canceled by online mob justice, or are under tremendous pressure to keep their mouths shut and to even publicly profess ideas that they disagree with, like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, statements that they have to endorse just to get hired. How is that different than having to sign a statement saying you're not a communist to get hired? So you may have heard that in recent weeks, MIT, followed by Harvard, eliminated these requirements. So let's hope this is a sign that things are getting better. In one workshop entitled Encroachment Upon Open Inquiry, experts from 3 different fields, social work, psychiatry, and anthropology, talked about ways that college professors are forced to ascribe to theories and ideologies that are unproven, unsound, and contrary to what the facts and research actually indicate is true. For instance, until 2022, the Council of Social Work's Educational Policy and its accreditation standards, the EPAS, did not include the terms equity, inclusion, anti-racism, anti-racist, or white supremacy at all. In 2022, those didn't exist. Since 2022, they are dispersed dominantly throughout the document, 26, 22, 20, 13, and 2 times respectively. In many cases, the directives surrounding these words are extremely burdensome, if not impossible to adhere to. The psychiatrist who presented this information was similarly frustrated regarding holding efforts to distort and suppress the truth and uncertainties about treating young people diagnosed or misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria. He spoke of distinguished Professor Alan Josephson, for example, who was demoted in 2017 to junior faculty member, effectively having been fired, after serving 15 years as chief of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Psychology at the University of Louisville. During a 2017 panel discussion, he said, "The notion that gender identity should trump reproductive organs, external genitalia, is counter to medical science, and that transgender ideology neglects the child's need for developing, coping, and problem-solving skills necessary to meet developmental challenges." Whether or not these comments were in alignment with what others are saying about this serious issue that we should be able to discuss, a person with Josephson's expertise should be allowed to express his opinions about it without repercussions, especially in a professional setting in which he was invited to comment. More recently, biologist Carol Hooven left Harvard after publicly talking about the reality of gender. A biologist talking about the reality of gender. God forbid. She was immediately attacked on social media by a representative of Harvard's DEI office, calling her transphobic, even though Hooven had stated, understanding the facts about biology doesn't prevent us from treating people with respect. We can respect their gender identities and use their preferred pronouns. Eventually, Hooven felt it necessary to resign, explaining, while the stated aims of DEI may have been laudable, in practice, DEI culture allows the recasting of certain ideas as dangerous and harmful, which squashes viewpoint diversity and the open, vigorous debate that should be at the heart of a thriving institution of higher education. So while I was not forced to resign, Harvard's culture of intolerance, particularly toward my scientific views on the nature of sex, led me to feel that my only choice was to leave. I also heard about another distinguished endocrinologist at the McGill University School of Medicine who was removed from teaching on the topic of disorders of sexual development due to the complaints of 2 students who declared he'd used outdated and stereotyped conceptions. Conceptions. So, I mean, imagine this, that the professor is forced out because students didn't like what he said based on his expertise. They knew better. The presenter told similar stories, one after another, of experts in their fields being punished, vilified, and drowned out by campus protesters for not adhering to the new party line, even when supplying ample scientific evidence and research on their opinions. I also heard former San Jose State anthropology professor Elizabeth Weiss, who I consider brilliant, who was forced into early retirement after posing a picture of herself with a skull in her office, handling it without gloves. She's an anthropologist, right? It has a perfect magazine cover style photo. And after the post stirred outrage from some in the Native American community, she was locked out of the school's collection of skeletal remains. Upon which she filed a lawsuit claiming that the university had retaliated against her. However, she lost her battle to regain access to the collection. Instead, she and the university reached a settlement to have her voluntarily submit her resignation, essentially go into early retirement. She does have a new book out about the ordeal with that photo, infamous photo on the cover, entitled On the Warpath. So you can read about her story. So in addition to many other examples, I routinely ran into other HXA attendees who told me about their own such tales, like another anthropologist in Canada who feared for her job after being called to an administrative office for mentioning again the reality of male and female gender. We even heard from a keynote speaker, Hakeem Oluseyi, who was publicly crucified after refuting claims about James Webb, who some claim was homophobic and part of a plot to root gays out of government positions. There was an effort by these folks to prevent NASA's latest telescope from being named after him for this reason, which prompted Oluseyi to research the matter and discover that the claims were completely false, which is why NASA never addressed the matter and kept the name as planned. Regardless of the truth, he was canceled because he refuted what others insisted is still true, even though it isn't. Called him all kinds of rotten things. And I mean, as bold as he was, I think it was pretty clear to me that he's still in a lot of pain over this. So I could go on, but I think I've said enough to make the point that life on our college campuses these days is oppressive for professors, faculty, and students who are afraid to do the one thing that they're all supposed to do, be able to think and speak and argue out loud. Fortunately, there was also a lot of good news about a shift that's taking place. I particularly enjoyed a session entitled What Universities Owe the Liberal Project. It included 3 presenters, all of whom agreed universities must return to and make liberalism's commitment to free inquiry and debate the core of their mission. I was particularly inspired by Emily Chamley Wright, president of the Institute for Humane Studies, an organization rooted in classical liberal tradition and promotes a freer, more humane, and open society by connecting and supporting talented graduate students, scholars, and other intellectuals who are driving progress in the critical conversations shaping the 21st century. That's a liberal minister and one who believes that the solution to the extreme divisions, intolerance, and lack of progress going on in our world today requires a recommitment to the liberal project, which is what our liberal religion is all about. We need another renaissance to rediscover its ideals. And Professor Chamley Wright, who was kind enough to share her manuscript with me, did not let me down. And I wish that I had time to read it to you in its entirety, but a few excerpts we'll have to do. With the understanding that these are big problems, I want to suggest that an even bigger problem looms. The fate of our generally free, constitutionally constrained, liberal democratic order is hanging in the balance. Enlightenment-era liberalism advanced imperfectly and inconsistently a radical idea that individuals by default deserve respect. By default, deserve respect. This default respect translated again hatingly and inconsistently into liberal democratic freedom as it evolved. Liberalism also became a mindset, a cultural ethos that privileged openness, curiosity, ingenuity, and intellectual humility. This metaphor, the university is the front line in a war, has become so commonplace that we don't even think to scrutinize it. My concern, however, is not merely that warfare is particularly a bad metaphor, it's that the metaphor does the real damage. The campus culture war framing turns the peaceful exchange of ideas into combat. Intellectual rivals are no longer colleagues who seek to understand or persuade, they are enemies who seek to crush. Friends who issue challenge in our direction are not thought partners, they're traitors who must be expelled from the ranks of learned society. Worse still, the culture war framing has led to both sides arming up, willing to use illiberal means to seize power and exercise control. Instead of an ideological war, we ought to be finding fellow liberals, whatever their political stripe, who still believe in these core principles, and working with them to identify solutions to hard challenges facing the liberal order, both on campus and in our broader world. We are facing a lot of complex challenges: backsliding of democratic norms, rising polarization and declining social trust, climate change, healthcare, housing, design and governance issues, and tech and innovation. The list is long. And ideally, solutions to these challenges will be liberal solutions that preserve liberty and foster human flourishing. But that can't happen if liberal ideas and concerns are not on the table. Reigniting scholarly interest in the liberal project is not about insisting upon a list of preordained conclusions. It's about reminding ourselves and our fellow liberals that basic liberal principles, the inherent dignity of every person, individual liberty, equality before the law, intellectual openness, limits to government authority, require continued exploration and fresh application if we are to sustain and fortify a robust, inclusive, liberal, democratic society. That was the last lecture I heard, and it was, for me, the most important message of the week. The good news is that many presenters express their belief that the tide is finally turning, thanks in part to brave souls who are willing to speak up and take a beating if necessary. I already mentioned MIT and Harvard's recent elimination of their DEI hiring policies. That's huge, especially that it was those schools. Also, during the past 2 years, since we met in Denver, HXA has nearly doubled in its membership. And now has 50 HXA communities on campuses around the U.S. and Canada. There's campuses that are willing to entertain heterodoxy officially on their campuses. And this change will reflect HXA's commitment to open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement. As its slogan says, great minds don't always think alike. And I also now have hope that liberal values, those I've been preaching about for years, those that are supposed to be central to our Unitarian religion, have a real chance of becoming humanity's core values again, so that we might live peacefully together and advance together as one human family across the globe. So I walked away feeling great. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Please stand, join me for number 1018. Come and go with me. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. And there'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Our closing benediction. Today I want to share the words of James Arthur Ray. Control is never achieved when sought after directly. It is the surprising outcome of letting go. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.